He's at his terminal. It's late. The floor has cleared. The cleaners are moving around him with their trolleys, and he is reading a number on his screen. A loss. £40,000. Real money, sitting in the settlement queue like an accusation. He thinks about the form he'd have to file, the notation it would create, the call from London the following Tuesday morning. Everything running smoothly out there, Nick? He thinks about the word his manager used to describe his operation. Model. He thinks about what it cost him to earn that word and what it will cost him to lose it. The cursor blinks. He types a 5-digit number. He hits enter, and the loss moves. That's fiction. Here's what actually happened.
Welcome to the Talent Files. I'm K.R. Talon. I write financial fiction, thrillers built on the real mechanics of market fraud, trading psychology, and the specific ways that institutions fail the people inside them and the people outside them. This show exists because the research behind the fiction is, in most cases, more interesting than anything I could invent. Every book I've written started somewhere true. This podcast is where I show you that place. Each episode, I take one novella and pull it apart. The real scandal that inspired it, the mechanics I kept, and the ones I dramatized. Where the numbers in the story match the numbers in the historical record, and where they don't.
We're starting with The Error Account, the first book in my Rogue Traders series, a financial thriller about a derivatives trader in Singapore in the early 90s who builds something in the dark, a hidden account, a set of fabricated records, an architecture of small deceptions that grows over 3 years into a catastrophe that destroys Britain's oldest merchant bank. Before I tell you what really happened, I want to read you something from the novella. This is from Chapter 2. The trader's name in the book is Nick Rains. He's just moved a £40,000 loss into a hidden account for the second time. The first time, he'd done it to protect a junior colleague. The second time, there's no one to protect but himself.
He could have run it through the standard error correction process. Filled the form, submitted it to London with a note, taken the small administrative bruise. It would have gone on his desk's record. Not damaging. Errors happened. But visible. He thought about the word model. The way Cross had used it. The weight of it. His jaw tightened. He reread the loss figure twice. The cursor blinked in the field where the account number went. He typed 8888.
His index finger rested on the key for 2 seconds before he hit enter. The specific stillness of a man stepping off a curb in the dark, knowing the road is probably empty, going anyway. He hit enter. The loss moved. The screen refreshed to 0. The second time was easier than the first. That part he'd expected. How much easier? That he hadn't. By the end of the year, the account held £2 million. He had stopped counting the number of times he'd opened it. That passage took me a long time to write. Not the mechanics of it. The mechanics I understood cold. What took time was the psychology. The specific arithmetic of a man who knows exactly what he's doing and does it anyway, because the alternative requires him to say a true thing out loud. Nick Rains is fictional. The man he's based on was not.
His name was Nicholas William Leeson. He was born in 1967 in Watford, England. His father was a plasterer. He grew up on a council estate and left school at 18 with a set of A-levels and a specific kind of hunger, the kind that comes from watching money operate at a distance and deciding, without drama, that you're going to get closer to it. He started at Coutts, one of Britain's oldest private banks, as a clerk, settling paper checks, processing certificates, back office work, invisible work, the kind that nobody remembers doing unless they were doing it. He was exceptionally good at it. In 1989, he moved to Barings Bank, founded in 1762, older than the United States, financiers to the Crown, the bank that helped fund the Louisiana Purchase on behalf of the United States government. 2 centuries of prestige, institutional memory, and the particular confidence of an organization that had survived everything: Napoleon, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and expected to survive everything that came next.
Leeson joined as a settlements clerk. Within 2 years, he was sent to Jakarta to untangle a back-office mess. Over £100 million in unmatched share certificates that had been sitting in cardboard boxes, unreconciled, for 4 years. He spent 6 weeks sorting it, matched the ones that could be matched, wrote off the ones that couldn't, closed the room.
London's response, when it was done? 3 words. Keep us posted. He got the Singapore job 2 weeks later.
The Singapore International Monetary Exchange, SIMEX, was one of the most active derivatives trading floors in Asia. Leeson's mandate was simple: run the Nikkei 225 arbitrage desk, buy futures on SIMEX, sell the identical contract on the Osaka Exchange, or vice versa, and pocket the spread. Thin margins, high volume, low risk by design. Clean work, safe work, the kind of work that produces excellent numbers and doesn't require close supervision. There was one problem, and it was a problem that Leeson buried before he ever took his seat on the floor. When Leeson applied for his trading license in the UK, the Securities and Futures Authority registration that would have formally authorized him to operate as a broker, his application was rejected. He had an outstanding county court judgment against him. A credit card debt, missed payments. Nothing dramatic, but the SFA checked and the CCJ was there, and the answer was no.
He put the rejection letter in a drawer. Then he applied for a Singapore license through Barings' own compliance office. Different form, different jurisdiction, different person reviewing it. His compliance administrator, who was 3 weeks from leaving the firm and had a queue of 60 files on her desk, processed it without cross-referencing the UK rejection. No one asked, he didn't say. He was 25 years old, and he was already, without having stolen a single pound, operating on a foundation that couldn't be examined too closely.
Leeson joined as a settlements clerk. Within 2 years, he was sent to Jakarta to untangle a back-office mess. Over £100 million in unmatched share certificates that had been sitting in cardboard boxes, unreconciled, for 4 years. He spent 6 weeks sorting it, matched the ones that could be matched, wrote off the ones that couldn't, closed the room.
London's response, when it was done? 3 words. Keep us posted. He got the Singapore job 2 weeks later. And there it was, the information the system hadn't meant to give him, that the gap existed, that the back office and the trading desk were, in this particular office, supervised by the same person, that the connecting door was his. He didn't immediately exploit it. He tells the story this way himself, that the second time was a market loss, not a colleague's error, and that he used the account not because he'd planned to, but because the alternative required explaining a bad day to London, and London had told him he was running a model operation, and the distance between that description and the truth was now a distance he had to maintain. By the end of 1993, account 88888 held the equivalent of approximately £2 million in hidden losses. By the end of 1994, it held the equivalent of £208 million.
Here is the thing about Nick Leeson that I want you to hold before we get to the earthquake. Barings gave him control of both sides of the desk. In every functional financial institution, the person executing trades and the person recording and settling those trades are different people, supervised by different chains, reporting to different managers. This separation, called segregation of duties, is the single most basic internal control in trading operations. It is not sophisticated. It is not complicated. It is finance's version of having one person count the money and a different person watch them count it. Barings, in Singapore, gave both jobs to Nick Leeson. He ran the trading desk. He ran the back office. He controlled the records. He processed the settlements. He approved his own positions. He could open an error account, move a loss into it, reconcile it at quarter end, and the only person who would have known was the person who had done it. This was not Leeson's design. Barings built this structure. It was cheaper. Singapore was a smaller office. He was good at both sides. It made operational sense, until it catastrophically didn't.
I think about that a lot when I write these books. The narrative version of Leeson is a rogue trader, a villain, a bad actor in a clean system. The accurate version is more complicated. A competent man given an incompetent structure, who made a series of choices that the structure made easier than they should have been. Both things are true. The choices were his. The architecture that made them possible was not.
January 17th, 1995, 5:46 in the morning. An earthquake hit the city of Kobe, Japan. Magnitude 6.9. The elevated Hanshin Expressway, a 5-kilometer stretch of raised highway, collapsed on its side, section by section, in the dark. More than 6,000 people died. The economic damage to one of Japan's major industrial cities was immediate and enormous. Leeson was asleep in Singapore when it happened. His alarm went at 6:30. He reached for his phone. He read the word Kobe on the screen. He understood, before he understood anything else, that the band was gone. His position before the earthquake, the short straddle he built to generate premium income for 88888, was premised on the Nikkei staying within a 2% range. The Nikkei had been in that range for 6 weeks. Given every data point available at 9 a.m. on the night of January 16th, the position made sense.
At 6:12 in the morning, it became an existential problem. He got to the floor. The screens told the story. Nikkei futures down 220 points, down to 80. Osaka limit down. He looked at the numbers and he made the decision that ended everything. And it was, in a grotesque way, the same decision he'd been making for 3 years. Not this. Not yet. Not the clean admission, while there was still a chance the market would move in his favor. He didn't close the position. He added to it. By 10 o'clock that morning, he had bought £180 million in Nikkei futures, pushing into a market moving hard against him, trying to support an index that the world was selling. By the last week of January, he owned approximately half the open interest in the March Nikkei futures contract. The market's movement and his position's movement had become the same thing. When he bought, the index rose. When he stopped buying, it fell. He was, without intending it, a one-man price support operation for the world's second-largest equity index. He understood this was not sustainable. He bought anyway.
On the morning of February 23, 1995, Nick Leeson came to his office at 5 o'clock. The city was dark. He made coffee. He sat at his desk without turning on the screens. For the first time in 3 years, he did not turn on the screens. He printed a letter for the bank's chairman, 11 pages. An account, not an apology. He'd say later that apology was for people who hadn't seen it coming. He knew what it held. The real figures. The honest spreadsheet. 3 years of what the account had actually contained versus what London had been told. He left the letter with his assistant and asked her to courier it to London, marked personal. He went downstairs to the lobby. His wife was waiting with 2 bags.
They flew out of Singapore that morning. The destination on the boarding pass was not where they were going. She didn't ask. They had the specific economy of a couple who had learned to reduce their conversations to functional minimums. In the taxi to the airport, she held his hand. He sat with the knowledge of what was behind him. The letter on the desk. The courier call at 8. The sequence of arithmetic that would follow. And he thought, I am so tired. On his monitor, visible from the lobby windows as they left, was a post-it note. 2 words. I'm sorry.
He was arrested at Frankfurt Airport on March 2nd, 1995, extradited to Singapore, sentenced in December to 6.5 years in Changi Prison. He served 4 before his early release due to a cancer diagnosis. Barings Bank was sold to ING. The sale price? £1 sterling.
The Error account follows the real story with a precision that I think would surprise readers who don't know the Barings case. The account number is real. The earthquake time is real. I checked the seismographic record. 5:46 a.m. The Jakarta backstory is real. The structural failure, one man controlling both sides of the desk, is real. The note on the monitor. The post-it. 2 words. What I changed, and why.
The first covered error in the novella belongs to Sarah Yeo, a junior colleague who sells a contract she meant to buy. In the real case, the first error was made by a trader named Kim Wong. I changed the name and gender deliberately, not to obscure the source, but because Sarah Yeo's arc in the book is longer and more important than a single chapter. She becomes the desk's quiet conscience. By the end of the book, she's the one who finds the post-it and calls London. I needed her to be a fully realized character, not a historical placeholder. The protagonist's name is Nick Rains, not Nick Leeson. I make this distinction in every based on true events book. The real person made their real choices, and their real consequences belong to them. My characters make choices in scenes that are invented, extended, or compressed. Rains is built from Leeson's documented psychology, the dry register, the forward momentum, the specific way he avoided examining what he was doing, even as he documented it with extraordinary precision. But he is not Leeson. The gaps between them are where the fiction lives.
The interior life is the largest departure. The real Nick Leeson has given a lot of interviews over the years, and the picture they paint is less introspective than the person on the page. The Rains of the novella carries a persistent, low-level awareness of what he is, who watches himself with a detachment that makes the ongoing choices more disturbing, not less. That's my construction. What I know about Leeson is what he said publicly. What I don't know, what no one knows, is what he thought at 5 in the morning before he turned off the screens. That's where the fiction goes. The one element I deliberately heightened, Elena, the wife. In Leeson's real story, his wife Lisa was largely kept in the dark. The novella uses the marriage differently.
as the measure of what the work costs. Every scene with Elena is a scene about what a person can see and choose not to examine. That parallel was important to me. Leeson was doing it with London. He was doing it with his own conscience. The marriage became the third version of the same pattern.
£827 million. That was the final tally of losses in account 88888. At the time, roughly $1.4 billion US. Barings Bank's entire capital, the sum of everything the bank owned, net of its obligations, was approximately £540 million. The losses exceeded the bank's entire equity by more than 50%. There was no scenario in which Barings survived disclosure. The only question, once the number was known, was what happened next. What happened next was this. The Bank of England spent a weekend in February and March 1995 trying to find a buyer. Several banks looked at the books. Several banks passed. ING, the Dutch financial services group, agreed to buy. The purchase price, for an institution that had operated continuously since 1762, was £1.
Nick Leeson was sentenced to 6.5 years and served 4. He was released in 1999, having written a memoir, Rogue Trader, from prison. It became the basis for a film starring Ewan McGregor. He has given hundreds of interviews over the years about risk management, about the psychology of cover-ups, about the structural failures that allowed a 28-year-old trader in Singapore to destroy something 232 years old. He now works, among other things, as a public speaker on the subject of risk. No senior Barings executive was criminally charged.
After Barings, the financial industry had a conversation about segregation of duties, about the specific structural failure of allowing one person to control both sides of a trading operation, about the culture of trusting numbers without asking who was producing them. The conversation produced recommendations, guidance documents, internal audits at major institutions.
And then, in 2008, a compliance officer at Société Générale worked late on a Friday evening in January and found an anomaly in a trading account. An anomaly that traced to a trader who had spent 5 years in the bank's compliance department, learning exactly where the surveillance systems looked and where they didn't. A trader who had used that knowledge to build a $49 billion directional position disguised as routine arbitrage. We'll talk about that in episode 2. The lesson of the Barings case is not about Nick Leeson. It's about the system that handed him the keys to both rooms and didn't check whether the rooms had a connecting door.
The lesson is structural. The lesson is that the gap between reported numbers and real numbers is maintained by human beings, and the human beings maintaining it are, in almost every case, the same human beings with the most to lose from the disclosure. The lesson is that no surveillance system catches what it isn't designed to look for. The lesson, if I'm being honest, is that the market learned it once and then forgot it in time to learn it again.
That's episode 1 of the Talent Files. The novella is The Error Account, book 1 of the Rogue Traders series. You can find it on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. If you want early access to what I'm working on next, bonus chapters, and the research documents behind the fiction, the link for that is in the show notes too. Next episode, Delta Neutral, Paris, 2005. A compliance officer learns exactly where the bank's cameras point, and exactly where they don't. And then he gets a better job. The real story behind one of the largest trading frauds in history, and the board member who sold $86 million in shares 11 days before anyone officially knew there was a problem. I'm K.R. Talon. The stories are fiction.
The numbers are real.